Hello everybody and welcome back to Typical City. The Bayer Leverkusen 20-year-old wonder kid Florian Wirtz is the latest attacking midfielder to be linked with Manchester City. But how much truth is there to this rumour? Is it likely to even happen in this transfer window or potentially in a future transfer window that is one to keep an eye on? I'm not too sure either way, to be honest. But in other news, Pep Guardiola, an injury list grows, and it's not adding a player you'd think, he's adding himself to that injury list. Can you believe it? Pep Guardiola is not going to be there on the next two games on the touchline against Sheffield United and Fulham, and how much is that going to impact the team and the feel-good factor, going off the fact that we've won 2 games already this season, 3 if you count the UEFA Super Cup. 2 games out for Pep Guardiola due to a back injury. We'll get into that. Bernardo Silva, a new contract, the inevitable contract. The rumour had been growing and growing in the last couple of weeks, and now finally it sounds like it's going to happen, and this potentially is the best bit of business throughout the transfer market. I know it's not the most exciting because he's not new, but in reality, you lose Bernardo Silva, then imagine the nightmare scenario of trying to replace Gundogan, Mahrez and Bernardo Silva. That is a nightmare scenario that we don't have to live. It's no longer a nightmare scenario. The reality is Bernardo Silva's going to stay, and that is fantastic news. But let's have a look at Florian Wirtz. I'm going to get his stats up first, which is interesting. 25 appearances. So he is slowly, and I think it was 8 of those were substitute appearances coming onto the pitch, and he was subbed off 7 times, I believe. So as the minutes reflect those figures I've just given you, with 1,815 minutes. So he's been slowly bedded in. How ready is he to make the leap from Bundesliga substitute appearance material for Bayer Leverkusen to treble-winning Manchester City? Is he ready to make that leap yet? Personally, I think he is. I think he's an absolute talent, and he's not been linked with the club yet enough, really. And I think this rumour is slowly growing. I think more City fans themselves have demanded Florian Wirtz than the actual realistic links. Let's take a look at those links, actually. Fachahez is the publication that announced it, as well as Matteo Moretto, which is mixed in terms of credibility, hit and miss, a bit of a shot in the dark, I believe, really, this one, and namely because Fabrizio Romano himself has come out and said the likeliness of this deal is very, very slim because of the figures. The market value of Florian Wirtz right now is 85 million euros, which is huge. He's contracted until 2027, so we're going to have to break the bank. A major investment will be needed to sign Florian Wirtz, but I wouldn't put it past City to do something, because I'm starting to sense a little bit of a panic with Paquetá. They were obviously not expecting Kevin De Bruyne's injury. That was just an unforeseen circumstances that is hard to deal with, but we need to deal with it. The Paquetá situation, that deal was virtually done. And then all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from underneath them, and they found themselves sat on their arse, City, all of a sudden, with no player to replace Kevin De Bruyne or add to the squad, as well as Kevin De Bruyne. So all of a sudden it is starting to look a bit panic. And when you start panicking, you do make rash decisions, and those decisions aren't as pragmatic as you'd want them to be. And maybe City do go and break the bank for him. 100 million euros is the reported figure that City would at least have to pay to even suggest the sale of Florian Wirtz from Bayer Leverkusen to Manchester City. So that is no small chunk of change. And I don't like the £100 million price tag. The more and more I see other clubs spending it, in fact, name me a £100 million success. It's as simple as that. There is very, very few players that have gone for £100 million or €100 million anywhere. If you go into euros, the list is doubled, basically, because the amount of players that were 90 million, 95 million, that so many players were over 100 million euros. And name me a success. I think I'll probably go out on a limb and say Mbappe was somewhat of a success in terms of the player himself, but how well did he do? What has he won? In terms of Champions League, he was there to win the Champions League. He didn't do that. So, in terms of the player, quality, but how many other players have gone for 100 million euros? So many. Even Ronaldo to Juventus. What did he win at Juventus? He didn't win a Champions League, not at Juventus. And they spent 100 million euros on him. I could keep going. Jack Grealish, not been 100 million pounds worth of player. No one has been £100 million worth of player. And the more and more it happens, the likeliness is someone's going to not be bothered by that £100 million price tag. But it seems to be a psychological attachment for each player that they've got to have that stigma in the back of their minds, like constantly, like, oh, you're a £100 million player. Well, you better be worth it then. You better play like it. And they seem to struggle. It seems to be a horrible association with the player. So I'd rather City not do that and keep it below 100 and go in for Florian Wirtz next transfer window. But we're in desperate need of a player of this quality. Let's keep going with his stats there. 4 goals and 8 assists. Not great output, but you compare that to the minutes, not so bad. The fact that he's so young. He's not really in the team. But the one thing I did want to highlight is the one at the bottom, is that dribbles per game. 3.3 dribbles per game on average. And these stats are from 2023, 22, 23. Combined over Europa League appearances as well as Bundesliga appearances. Now, he actually got, I think it was about 8 or 9 of those appearances are in the Europa League. So he was given more time in the European competition than he was in the Bundesliga. And his dribbles per game was much higher as well. In the Europa League, it was like 3.8 and 2.8 in the Bundesliga. So in both competitions there, he's showing his ability to carry the ball. And we saw Phil Foden beat his man so many times. And that's 23-year-old Phil Foden, mind you, who's looking old compared to Florian Wirtz now. You know, he's getting into slowly entering the peak of his career, Phil Foden, whereas this is a kid we're talking about. Spending €100 million on a kid like this, it's a huge gamble, financial gamble I'm talking about. In terms of the player, I'm almost certain he would fit like a glove into this Manchester City side. And passing accuracy as well, 81%, that's great. You know, you're surrounded by players. The things I've seen from his... from the clips that I've seen of him, his vision is incredible. He carries the ball really well. I will highlight his light. He's very lightweight. His frame is very thin. He's about 5'7", 5'8". So he doesn't look big, but that's such an antiquated and lazy analysis, especially when you talk about the Premier League, because so many people still use that archaic dinosaur analogy of, oh, has he got the physicality for the Premier League? I mean, it's so old now. So many players have come in that are small and lightweight and just bossed the Premier League. I don't think the physicality is that important anymore. I really don't. I think the Premier League's overhyped as this physical league. I think slowly but surely we're becoming much more of a technical league, and the physicalities are done and dusted. Those were the 90s. That's how United used to win. Arsenal used to win with Vieira, Tony Adams, Sol Campbell, even Thierry Henry, Ian Wright, Bergkamp, big guys. You know what I mean? Now you don't need to be like that anymore. It's an antiquated way of looking at the game. So I think Florian Wirtz will fit like a glove. It is just the likeliness of this deal is incredibly slim. Real Madrid, Barcelona and Chelsea all rumoured to be interested in, but they're all waiting, trigger happy for the next transfer window, because it sounds like this isn't going to happen. He was originally signed from FC Köln for £200,000. Those sort of deals are just, they tempt you, don't they? They tempt you to wonder. I start wondering, why aren't City keeping an eye on players or other clubs? Because I know we've got players coming through the academy and players that are so young that we're going beyond even going to such a young age for these players now in our academy that we're not spending any money on them because they're coming up as kids. We bring them through and educate them in the college that's at the campus at the Etihad. So we don't have to spend £200,000, but I wouldn't mind the odd one, you know, just somewhere. Just keep an eye on these players that are of that price range. You know, Riyad Mahrez was like £600,000 that Leicester signed him for. And what a signing that was. The profit that they made, we spent 60 plus million on Riyad Mahrez and they only spent 600,000 on him. FC Köln, £200,000 they spent. Bayer Leverkusen spent £200,000 to FC Köln for this kid. Florian Wirtz is now about to go for 85 and upwards. Come next transfer window, you're looking at 100 million. So what a bit of business that's been. And I do think City could dabble their toe in the water a little bit when it comes to these types of signings. Ones that aren't mouth-watering, you know, but look a bit future-proof the player as well. Future-proof the club and how to operate going forward, and thinking pragmatically like that from a business sense is something that I'm not seeing enough of from City. But in terms of the big money signings, I'm quite happy with the way the club's operating, and I'm really happy with the way the academy's operating. There's just that middle ground of signing youngsters that are 18, 19-year-old for less than £1 million. You know, those sort of types of signings. I'd like to see City bring a few more of those in. But yeah, I think the player is going to be worth it. I think he really is going to be worth it if we were. The credibility of the sources is in question. The likeliness of this deal to suggest it's going to happen this particular window is very, very unlikely, which is a shame because it would be perfect to fill the role that we require. A player that can play right down the spine of the midfield, from central midfield, attacking midfield, can even play right behind the striker, has played on the right wing as well. So there is that versatility there with Florian Wirtz. It's just the price. It's just not going to happen, is it? And then, let's go on to other news. Pep Guardiola's injury, 2 games out. I know it's only 2 games. This was emergency back surgery required, which has been a success, thankfully, thank God. But we're not going to see Pep Guardiola with a Zimmer frame on the touchline for the next 2 games, unfortunately, just walking his way out. And he can't do it, can he? And the guy is so animated on the touchline with his bloody hand gestures and doing all this crazy airport landing signals like whoop, like that, just crazy stuff that Pep likes to give out his instructions with these hand gestures. He's got a bad back. He can't do it. How much is he going to be missed in these games? And I think they've picked the games wisely, because out of the two games that he is missing, it's not like he's missing a top 6 game. It's Sheffield United and Fulham at home. So you like to think we're going to win those games with or without Pep Guardiola, and the squad should have enough in the bank and in their own ability to just take to the pitch and win the game without Pep Guardiola being on the touchline. Hopefully that's the case, and all my best wishes to Pep Guardiola. Hope that injury doesn't go any longer for 2 games and we see him back sooner rather than later. Bernardo Silva contract is the next bit of news, which is just fantastic. 2026 is the reported date for him to have signed until. This is a verbal agreement. I think this was on the cards. It was a kind of an inevitable situation because City have really stuck their feet in the ground. One of the few times that City have said, no, you're not going anywhere. We do have that anyone can leave if they want to leave policy. And I really agree with that, but I think they were right to stick their feet in the ground with this particular player because he's such a rare breed of player. You know, there's no Bernardo Silvas out there that we could go and replace. We've got the fear factor of replacing Kevin De Bruyne coming up within a year or 2, you know, as he slowly phases himself out of the game in terms of age and obviously injury-prone player he is. He's starting to phase himself out, so we're going to have to start looking at replacements for Kevin De Bruyne. And thankfully, we don't need to look for a replacement for Bernardo Silva until 2026. Which is bloody brilliant news. The best bit of business throughout this transfer window, and I'm including Gvardiol, Kovacic, all the deals that have done. I'm pleased. I'm really pleased. And Doku as well. That's obviously pretty much nailed on, done now as well. So I'm really pleased with the Bernardo Silva contract. Above all else, I am that pleased. But Blues, Florian Wirtz, how likely do you think that's going to happen? How happy are you with these links? Do you even want Florian Wirtz? Pep's injury, how much is that going to impact the team on match day? And Bernardo Silva contract, I presume you're buzzing like I am. Get your comments in below. I'd love to hear them. Like and subscribe. Typical City is the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is Typical City now.